Welcome back to the channel where we make wealth building a mindset. My name's Warren, I'm a banker and property investor in the UK. And today we're talking about wealth inequality, specifically the UK racial home ownership wealth gap, how home ownership varies across the races in the UK and why that's important. But before we get into that, do me a favor and smash that like button and share this. If you're feeling extra nice, share this with somebody else that you think needs to know about wealth and needs to build their wealth, because we're not trying to do that alone. The mission this year is to take our community, our friends and our families with us on a wealth building journey. So guys, why is this an important topic to be covering? Well, we know that between the races, between the communities in the UK and many other countries, there are disparities in income and, more importantly, wealth. And wealth plays a huge role when it comes to predicting outcomes for people's lives. And in the UK, home ownership is the second biggest source of wealth across the whole population. The price of property on average in the UK has doubled every 10 years since the 1960s. That is how valuable, how important an asset that property is. Now, having studied economics and worked in banking for my whole life, there's three things that I've noticed that the modern day economy, the modern day society wants from us as individuals. One is to work for as long as possible. Two is to pay as much taxes as possible. And three is to consume instead of producing. What do I mean by that? Buying, spending on stuff that we don't need, and this is me speaking from a banker's perspective, using debt to fuel that. I'm going to make another video at some point in the future on how the modern day economy is structured for us to rely on debt. Most Western, modern, advanced economies are deeply entrenched in debt, guys, but that's another topic for another day. So when it comes to that, working for as long as possible, paying as much taxes for as long as possible, consuming using debt and not producing, how do we separate ourselves from that indoctrinated view that we've been taught throughout our whole lives, working towards something that's countercultural, building wealth, producing, not consuming? Yes, we have to work, yes, we have to pay our taxes, but there's a way of doing that whilst enjoying life, building wealth and leaving an inheritance for our future generations. And one of the answers to that is property, guys. It's incredibly powerful. It's an effective tool at bridging the racial wealth gap, undoing the UK home ownership racial wealth gap and leaving an inheritance for our future generations. So let's look at some government statistics and data that gives us a snapshot of where we are in the UK right now. So this data here is taken from gov.uk, and what it does is it breaks down home ownership by ethnicity and area, so where you are in the UK, ethnicity and weekly income, and by age and group. We're going to focus on these two, ethnicity and area. If you want to see a video on wealth, specifically income by ethnicity, check out my other video, which will be linked in the description below and at the end of this video, on how income inequality varies across the races in the UK. So let's just start with some main facts and figures. This is basically a summary of the data below. So across England, 63% of households own their own homes. So basically 2/3. 68% of white British households own their own homes. 74% of Indian households own their own homes. I believe the Indian community have the highest rate of all ethnicities in the UK when it comes to home ownership. The lowest rates are in the Black African community, just 20%, and the Arab community, 17%. So let's just take a walk through of all of the communities in the UK. So as you can see here, you have the average, which we talked about just now, and then it goes on to the Asian communities. And within the Asian communities, you have Bangladesh, Chinese, Indian, Pakistani, Asian other. Then the Black communities, Black African, Black Caribbean, Black other, mixed communities, and then the white communities, which includes white British. For those of you who are not from the UK, British is, let me get this right, Scotland, Wales and England. British doesn't include Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. You also have white Gypsy Traveller, white other, no idea what that is. And then under other you have the Arab and the any other community. Super vague that. So the white community has the highest rate of home ownership, 56% for white Irish and 68% for white British. And that makes sense, right? Because this is Great Britain where we live. The indigenous people of this land are white people. They were the first people on this land. So it makes sense that they have the highest rates of home ownership. Why? because home ownership usually gets passed down through generations. So in the same way, if you went to say Nigeria, you'd expect the black community compared to say the white or Chinese or any other ethnicities to have the highest rate of home ownership because they've been there for longer. They've had a chance to accumulate land and to pass it down through the generations. So no surprises there. And then what looks to be second to me are the mixed race communities. So mixed race includes, according to these stats, white and Asian, white and black, African, white and black Caribbean, and then mixed other. Interestingly, out of all of those mixes, white Asian community have far and away the highest rate of home ownership. And when you look at the full Asian community, they're the second highest, what looks to be the second highest rate of home ownership in the UK. Indian, way out there at 74%, Pakistani at 58%, and then lower rates of home ownership in the Asian other Chinese and Bangladesh community. If you're from the Chinese and Bangladesh community, let me know, is it a cultural thing? So back in Bangladesh and China, does the population tend not to own homes and rent instead? Because there are countries, Germany for example, where the culture is to rent as opposed to buy. Here in the UK, we're very much a nation that believes in own your own home, especially since Margaret Thatcher. She introduced a lot of policies that pushed us towards that in the UK. So let me know what it's like back in China and Bangladesh if you're from there or know people from there. So Asian community second, black community is third. And again, there's variances in the black community. You've got black Caribbean and black African. Those are the main two black communities here in the UK. And they're all below 40%. The Caribbeans are the highest, and then black African 20%. Again, similarly, are you from Africa? Africa's a huge, huge, huge continent. But if you are African, let me know back in your home countries again. Is it cultural to not own your own home? Is it more cultural to rent as opposed to buy? Let me know. Very interested to know how things work. And then lastly, Arab and any other. I mean, who are these any other people? So vague. There's not even a key at the bottom explaining that, but Arab and any other community, lowest home owning communities in the UK. Now let's talk a bit about inequality, right? So why are there these differences? Specifically, I'm going to talk about the black community as a member myself. We can't talk about wealth inequality in the UK without talking about the history of how communities got over here. So to do that, we're going to have to touch upon the British Empire. So the British Empire, as you know, was one of the biggest land empires that's ever existed. And the British Empire extended across Africa, the Caribbean, and India as well. Some of the first people to come to the UK during the Windrush after the Second World War to assist the country in building back and regenerating itself because of the damage that had been caused to the infrastructure of the UK by the war was the Caribbeans. They were invited over by the Queen at the time and became British citizens. There were some Indians too, but not in the numbers that there were from the Caribbean. A lot of them faced discrimination. My grandma's told me stories, your grandparents might have as well, but things like opening a bank account. A lot of the Caribbean community who came over were shut out from being able to open banks. So they had to do a community form of banking called the partner. So even though that was a form of being able to raise capital, it was nowhere near what they could have raised through having access to traditional banking like normal people. Another aspect is the jobs that they took when they came over. So mainly lower paying jobs, things like postmen, bus conductors, nurses, train drivers, right? They were essential jobs, but they weren't high paying jobs. So again, they weren't director level jobs in banks or legal professionals, doctors, surgeons, etc. Why am I talking about this stuff? As a banker who's worked in credit risk, who's underwritten loans, studied economics, access to credit, access to loans, and having a well-paying job are really important when it comes to acquiring property and other assets and building wealth. Now, this article in The Guardian links to what I'm saying. It doesn't go into the history that dates back to the Windrush and the World War, which I just gave you, because that's important, but a lot of these articles don't, but that's okay. So this article talks about the distinction between this lady's white friends and black friends who were looking to buy houses. So the black friends had parents that weren't able to help them, weren't able to provide assistance with the deposit for a house, because a lot of them were in social housing to begin with. Social housing is government assisted housing that is offered at a discount. So essentially her parents didn't own houses that they were able to take equity out of and give to their children to help them get onto the property ladder. And then also further down you see here that a lot of the ethnic minorities live in cities, basically where properties are more expensive. So a property in London is a lot more expensive than a property on, say, the Isle of Wight or Cornwall or Devon. And it's the same in most countries throughout the world. Major cities of the country are more expensive to live in. Also talks here about jobs. So a lot of Black and Asian workers find themselves in precarious work. I mentioned just before this about the menial jobs that a lot of the Windrush generation went into. And in my other video, when I talk specifically about pay and salary in the UK, you will see that the proportion of ethnic minorities in high paying jobs in the UK much lower compared to the white community. Again, that has an impact on what you're able to afford, how much money you're able to save and invest and build with. It's all linked, guys. And then this point right here touches on what I just said about parents not being able to take equity out of their own homes and give to their children to help them onto the ladder because they're living in social housing. You don't own a home, you can't take equity out of it and give it to your children. And all of that exacerbates and prolongs wealth inequality, and specifically the racial home ownership wealth gap in the UK. So guys, I hope you found that interesting and useful. Just some stats and some information more than anything else on how home ownership varies across the races in the UK, and hopefully makes you think more about investing in property and working against wealth inequality and uplifting our children and our communities when it comes to accumulating wealth and passing it on. Guys, do me a favor. And by the way, guys, if you're looking for a tool that helps you analyze property deals, calculate stuff like the return that you can make, the profit that you can make on a property, how far up in value is expected to go, its likely rise in value over time, check out my dashboard in the link in the description below. I'll see you guys soon.